Welcome everyone to our weekly webinar. My name is Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice. White Collar Advice proudly sponsors Prison Professors nonprofit that enables us to give away as much free content as we possibly can. We strive to help all justice impacted people survive and thrive through this really wretched system. And the way to do it, we think, is by preparing and planning. But as a reminder, and what we're going to get into a little bit on our webinar today, is it's one thing to attend these webinars. It's another thing to embrace the reality of prison, because we received a message from someone who attended at least 6 webinars, and he is having a miserable experience inside of the minimum security camp. No fighting, nothing like that, but he feels like his couple of year sentence, it feels like a life sentence. He just cannot get going due to the monotony. And as I said earlier, he feels like it's Groundhog Day, worse than Groundhog Day. So I'm going to hope that I can interact with many of you who have been to prison, some of you who are going to prison, and I'm going to question you because, as I have said repeatedly, we continue to be told. I think they tell Scott to not hurt my feelings, though at this point, all I've been through, it takes a lot to offend me. People tell Scott, I don't want to tell Justin this. When he talks less and we hear from more people in the community, it's better. So I'm going to talk less and hear from you. Thank you. I'm not offended. So that's what we're going to do today. Let's start before we call on our friend Robert, who's new to our community. Then we're going to transition to Hamza, who's going to share what was a very difficult kind of initial experience, and then it's turned out perfectly. Or it's moving in the right direction, I should say. I want to start with, did anyone read about that proposed rule by the Bureau of Prisons, specifically regarding restitution? Did anyone come across that? What was can you give us your insights on how you read it, or and we're going to go through it? Share with everyone so I talk less. What was that article about?
It seemed like the article was they're looking at forcing a component of restitution upon people, and unfortunately, what it's turning out is it's people's families who are putting money on their books are paying their restitution. That was what I gathered from the article that I read.
That's a very good summary. So let's go back a few months. R. Kelly, I did a video about R. Kelly a few days ago. Some people went apoplectic. The goal is to teach. Okay, in that months ago, when R. Kelly was convicted, or he was sentenced in June of last year, it was determined that he had like $38,000 in his commissary account. And there was another guy, I think the doctor, who took advantage of women in the Olympic team. Had tons of money in his books. So what happened is there's this focus on, well, the restitution, and it should go to the victims. It should always be about the victims, of course. If you have a person than I'll ever be, who cares? Terrible message, all about him, never about the victims. It should be thrown in the trash. So it should be about the victims, but the BOP at times really wants to take it to another level, in our opinion. So this is relevant for all of you because it can lead to disciplinary infractions. If this rule passes, it will eventually lead to tons of disciplinary infractions for people in prison. I'm going to ask someone to explain to me why in a moment, but as a reminder, some senators, along with the Bureau of Prisons, are coming out stating that the lion's share of all money that is sent to people in prison would go towards their restitution. The BOP rule says the majority of the money sent to prisoners' commissary accounts would first go to pay their restitution debts and outstanding court fines. Opponents of the law say it shifts responsibility to family members like Hulan. Okay. And the Bureau of Prisons is considering the rule change after a post-investigation raised concerns about high-profile people like sex offender Kelly keeping large sums of money in their prison account rather than paying restitution to their victims. So the issue is people are going to find a way. Even right now, I would argue they've taken more over the last 2 or 3 years, I think, than I was in prison. This is more anecdotal, but if you owe restitution and you're building into your release plan that I'm going to pay it back, and then you kind of make an argument in prison that you shouldn't pay it back, or you want to pay less, it's just not going to end well. But numbers have gone higher, and it's going to go measurably higher in part because of this change. Scott, you've been to federal prison, or Gordon. if someone could chime in, Gordon, I know you served 12 and a half years in prison. Can someone surmise why this rule will lead to many more people in federal prison getting into trouble? Anyone?
On my end, what I see is having commissary is a benefit. It is a privilege, and it makes the experience much more manageable when you can buy a nicer pair of shoes, when you can buy some sweats, when you buy food so you're not beholden to whatever they're serving at the chow hall that night. The challenge is, and as Justin mentioned earlier, for the prison staff, they're concerned about the victims in the case. And if there's restitution due, they want that restitution. So it puts the inmates in a challenging position in terms of, yes, we want to make amends and pay those people back, but we also have to balance that with our desires. And I think that's going to put a lot of people in a tough position. And especially in this day of earned time credits in the First Step Act, disciplinary infractions, they have a harsher sting. Even the more minor 300 and 400 series infractions can put you in a position to not receive First Step Act credit for a certain amount of time after receiving the infraction.
Thank you. And I want to spend a few more minutes on this because some of you may be watching this part of the video thinking, well, Justin, I don't owe any restitution. This isn't relevant to me. Let me come back to the webinar when it's more relevant. If you're going to prison or you have a loved one in prison, they could associate, you could form a friend, even if you owe no money, could form an association with someone that owes money and doesn't want to pay it all back because they want a better life of luxury on the inside. The BOP will tell you commissary is a privilege, as Scott said, not a right. You have a right to get your 15% off. You don't have a right to get the time off in the drug program. Matt O'Callahan on our team, we did an extensive learning management system course around the residential drug abuse program. I'm going to post it tomorrow, where we get into the program and privileges and rights. It is a privilege, they would tell you, for commissary. Can someone else chime in who's been to prison and argue why it could lead to disciplinary infractions for some people who don't want to pay this restitution? Scott Brown, you've been to prison. Gordon, I know you just mentioned you served 12 and a half years. Can anyone chime in why this rule could lead to trouble?
I actually didn't do 12 and a half years. I did 7 years.
Whatever the number, you've been to prison, if you could offer some insights.
And then I got home on home confinement at 7 years, which was awesome. So the issue is that the original concept of the commissary was set up to raise money for recreational equipment. And there was supposed to be, when it was originally set up, there was supposed to be an inmate on this group and staff members that would make a decision of what would the monies be used for the commissary in terms of purchasing rec equipment. Because I had direct conversations with staff in TI because they had horrible televisions there. And I went straight to the rec officer there and I said, isn't the money from commissary supposed to pay for TVs? And they said, yes. And I said, well, can we replace all the TVs in the whole institution and convert them to digital? And they said, well, let me look into it. And 1 year later, they came back to me and said, yep, we're going to spend $18,000 and replace everything because of your recommendation.
So we thank you. And it's important to learn. What I know, a few weeks ago, someone sent me a message on Instagram where I'm not terribly active. And the person said, hey, my boyfriend's in prison. Like, he's asked me after the visitation to go give another inmate's girlfriend like $400 in cash. Like, is that normal? Should I do that? And the answer is, of course it's normal.
Yeah.
Of course it's normal because, and this is what's germane to all of you, if you have $360 a month to spend in the commissary, and if you know, even right now they're taking more, someone on this webinar, or they might already be in prison, they were taking $180 a month. If you know the lion's share of that money is going to go to restitution and you don't want to pay it, well, what do? Of course.
Yeah, well, they'll cut your commissary off if you don't pay.
They're not going to cut your they could, but let me tell you what creative and resourceful prisoners do.
Yeah.
They find someone who doesn't have court-ordered restitution, who doesn't have a fine, who might not spend their $360 a month commissary, and they go to them and say, hey, Joe, I know that you only spend about $150 a month. I would love that extra $200 limit that you have. How about I take your $200, and as a thank you, my girlfriend's going to give your girlfriend after visitation $275. Would you like to make a quick $75?
right?
I mean, is that
Happens all the
Matt?
time.
Did Matt O'Cal? Did you see things like that in prison? Money going to other prisoners' books?
Absolutely, all the time, especially to pay gambling debts.
Thank you. So Matt, unmute yourself. Share some of these
Yeah,
insights here.
absolutely.
Go ahead.
You see, very, very creative ways of people, manipulating the system to work around it. You've said it countless times. Don't gamble in prison. I've seen a lot of that where people are, scrambling to cover gambling debt, and they'll do it with either using a phone to send a Cash App payment, which is insane, or relying on someone on the outside to settle up that debt. It's better just to not gamble at all. But yeah, there's people that are constantly looking to manipulate the system.
So if you can embrace this reality that while you might not do it, there are people that may do it. And if they get caught, they're saying they're going to pay restitution. It's all about the victims, and then money, they have nothing coming into their account because they don't want it to go to restitution. They're having to go to, it's the reasons I know some people in prison who are spending $1,500 a month. And it wasn't the way Michael Santos was spending $500 or $1,000 a month. Michael would write a book via Core Links in 3 weeks at 5 cents a minute. That's a good way to spend money in prison, writing books via Core Links, not by having to go to 8 other prisoners' books. I want you to consider this as you get into your prison adjustment. At some point, Mr. Carper could probably join our team as a prison consultant because he writes all of his son's newsletters every single week, and he's reading about these same things that happen at Leavenworth. We want you to be aware of it and recognize as a casualty of your conviction. If you want money and they want it, let them take it. Find other ways. Okay. But there are just too many collateral consequences that follow bad choices. Before I transition, I see somebody's hands up. Is that your hand, Frank? Did we lose Frank? Frank, did you have a question? No. Okay.
There we go.
So,
I did.
okay.
Sorry,
Yes.
I had to
What's
unmute myself.
Yeah.
The question is, and you brought it up, if you don't have, you have restitution, but it's not court ordered, and then also any fine has already been paid, then what happens?
You owe no money, then you owe no money.
Well,
Then
you
could have.
owe money, but it says not, to be paid while you're in prison, but
Did the judge order that you didn't have to pay in prison?
it's not ordered, but it's not there.
Here's what happens. It's kind of like a voluntary. I use the analogy when I was in college at playing baseball. Some practices in the fall were voluntary, and if I didn't go, the coach volunteered not to play me because I didn't go to the voluntary practices. If they want you to pay for the 3 or 4 months that you're going to be in prison, here's how you respond as you built into your release plan. Absolutely, I'm going to pay. I made bad choices. I'm here to make amends, to build a new record, and prove worthy of a second chance. So if you deem that the lion's share of my money coming in should go to my restitution, I'm all for it. Thank you. You're there 3 months or 4 months. You can endure just about anything, and they're not going to take all of it. But you have to understand, you may win the battle like, oh, I don't have to pay. I can wait. That's when the case manager could take your file and throw it in the round file. Have a nice day, and you're in prison for a little longer time. So focus on the end game, getting out of there. And if that requires you to let them take more, let them take it, move on, have a nice day, get home to your family. Okay. Now let's transition to our friend Robert. Robert, are you there? I know this is going to be difficult. We're here. So much of what we want to do is share both good and bad stories. Everyone on this webinar is taking action, though you're at differing stages of the journey. And it's heartbreaking every now and again when someone will find us when they feel that it's too late in the sentencing stage. And to that end, I'd like to welcome Robert. We're grateful that you're speaking. Robert, tell us who you are and the length of your sentence and what happened.
Yeah, so thanks for the introduction, Justin. So my name is Robert, everybody. Nice to meet you all. I met Justin literally right after my sentence, within the first 5 minutes. He was referred to me by my sister, and my only regret is not talking with him prior to my sentence. In a nutshell, I had placed too much trust with my attorney. There were certain scenarios that we worked through prior to sentencing that I always question. For example, the PSR report or interview, sorry. I always knew that there was some importance there, but it was always kind of downplayed by my attorney as to something that is just a simple interview. Knowing what I know now, I should have gone back and prepared a lot more during that process. I was afraid to have those tough conversations that I'm having now with Justin and Scott about expectations of sentencing and post-sentencing that are kind of leading me now to go back and do a lot of damage control. So I'm doing what I can within 30 days, but I should have had this conversation and I should have had those tough questions asked a long time ago. My expectations were something different than what my attorney had kind of laid. And now I'm realizing that, and I know that it's not too late. As Justin says, there's always hope as long as I put in the work, which is what I'm doing right now.
So I'm going to have a question for you. We say on every webinar, we can't change the past. We can't guarantee what will happen moving forward. And we don't want any of you to speak about us the way that unfortunately many of you speak about your lawyers. And I know many of you have great lawyers. I'm not indicting every white collar defense attorney in America, please, or any lawyer in general. No, I'm not impugning the whole profession here. But many of you have experiences where you feel forgotten about. You don't get calls back. They get the money. Nothing happens. And they don't prepare you for what are some of the most important interviews of your life. And while we encourage you to accept responsibility, you are not at fault if you don't know what to do. And I know that's the reason many of you are here. You speak to managing expectations, Robert. You were expecting what? Based on correspondence that I've seen, a couple of years in prison. Is that correct?
At most, because of our special agreements, we were looking at probation. That was the expectation that was given to me by my attorney. So when I got the sentence, I was just, myself and the attorney were in utter shock.
What was the sentence?
84 months.
So let's talk about managing expectations for a moment. It would have been different if the lawyer said, hey, you should expect 7 to 10 years. Anything beneath that is a win. But when you're expecting probation to 2 or 3 years and you hear 7 years, it feels like a life sentence. So all of you should understand, you should be managing expectations. You should know what the guidelines are. Correct. Robert never knew what the sentencing guidelines were. He didn't review it, didn't understand it, didn't even really review the probation report when it came back.
Correct.
And we cover that in our probation report course. Like what happens when it comes back? So many people get this sort of call from their lawyer. Hey, the probation report came back, read it and let me know your thoughts. And it's like, well, okay, well, you're the lawyer. You've read 9 million of them. This is the only one that I'm ever going to read. How about I read it? You read it. We each put down our thoughts and collectively we'll review it.
Correct.
Robert didn't do that. He read it and all he said was, looks good to me, I guess.
Sure.
Now, as a result of not planning, forget about the sentence. Robert lives in California. The case was out of Texas. The lawyer was out of Texas. He lives in California. Can you understand the weakness of, someone articulate to me the weakness of having a Texas-based lawyer try to do BOP work with a client in California? Anyone? Go ahead, Frank.
It's difficult.
Somebody. Yeah, they don't know.
They don't know.
They don't know.
And they don't know the court. And even though, it may be federal law, there's the law, the courtroom and the law of that region. And essentially, if you don't know the judge, the local rules and the people you're dealing with, you're at a distinct disadvantage right at the start.
You're at a disadvantage when you have a lawyer in Texas ask for a prison that doesn't have the drug program and ask for a camp that would be last of the 5 prisons in California to ask for, because you do a simple Google search and say, looks good to me. And of course, the judge is going to recommend it. Now, the consequence of Robert not knowing, and it's why he's here. What do we have to? We have to try to amend the probation report, have to amend the sentencing recommendations. It's to his detriment because it's costing him money. And there's no guarantee that he'll even be successful by trying to undo bad decisions over the last few months. Robert agreed to speak because he wants to do better. With that said, Robert, I'll leave the last thoughts to you on what you encourage people in the community to do, whether you hire us or you just digest all of our free resources.
Yeah, I think it's important to have those tough conversations early on, as uncomfortable as they may seem. It's obviously a very terrifying experience, but it's something that you're going to have to deal with. The attorneys can't fix it for you. They can't suppress it for you. You're going to have those conversations by yourself. Furthermore, I feel like working with Justin and the team in reality it's kind of made me be held more accountable. So I understand now. Before there was a lot of denial. I shouldn't have done this. It's not my fault. Now, because of the process and because of kind of what I'm doing, I'm accepting responsibility a lot quicker. I've gone through the denial, I've gone through the anger. I'm really at the acceptance stage. And the more responsibility you take within yourself, the easier this process is going to be. I can't stress that enough. So accepting responsibility is going to get you a lot further than just denying it or blaming it on other people. Accept responsibility, take action, and really see this as dark as it may seem. And right after I spoke with Justin, to be honest, post sentence, I thought my life was over. I'm like, this is over, 7 years. Oh my God, what am I going to do? Having an immediate conversation with Justin really gave me light at the end of the tunnel. It's not too late to go back and fix these problems. As grave as they may seem, it's not too late. The first step, though, is you have to accept responsibility. The faster you do that, the sooner you do that, the better this process will be.
All of you know, I met Michael in prison. He mentored me and he introduced me to a very basic concept that's existed for thousands of years, this idea of pain and regret. There were days I didn't want to do things. And he said, that's fine, own that decision. Do you think in time you'll come to regret that choice? And I was referring to days I didn't want to wake early and work and write and exercise. I just wanted to chill and decompress because I let some guys get to me like, hey, you just got to prison, relax. You can prepare when you get closer to home. And then Michael helped me understand what are the consequences that follow those choices. Do it if you like, own it. So it might be painful to have a conversation with your lawyer and for him to call and yell at you. We're going to get into that in a few minutes with Hamza, but to call and yell at you, I don't work for you. Who do you think you're talking to? I've done this for 30 years, might be painful. But when you do it, what you don't have is the lasting regrets that accompanies all of some of what Robert's enduring right now. So thank you, Robert, for sharing your story. Gina, your hand was raised. What was your question?
So you specifically asked digest content and or hire you or digest free content. So our path has been, we found you guys very, very early in this process, like within 2 weeks of our arrest and release. And so we digested just podcast, bought both your books, read the books, started joining the webinars. I did a podcast with Michael, and then we hired you because we had time to do that, right? So we ingested as much as we could, get as much education as we can, and then said, okay, now we're ready for your help. And if we had a shorter period of time, obviously we would have hired you immediately. But I just think that, that's the way it worked for us. And we still have another 6 months or a year before sentencing.
Well, we appreciate you sharing that. And whether you're working with our team or you're retaining our team, we want to help you. And we want you to understand the consequences that follow every choice and learn from both how some people get through it well and why others struggle. To that end, Hamza, are you there, my friend?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm here.
Thank you. No, don't be. So I'm going to do a quick summary and then turn it over to you. Hamza called last Friday. He was a little off his game and frustrated because of some lack of information he was getting from his lawyer. Can you give us a summary of what happened?
So last week, after the interview, I wanted to turn over the narrative letter, which is very important because I've been taking the courses and Justin told me that you need to turn over the narrative to the probation officer, and I told my lawyer that, and he was like, no, I have a strategic way of doing stuff, and I was like, I need this turned. I need this letter turned over. And then I was just so frustrated. I called Justin, I explained to him, and he was like, this is the tough conversations that you need to have with your lawyer. You need to let him know that you paid him money, so he needs to work for you. And I was like, all right. So he sent me, what I should say. And sure enough, I sent it to him. And I tell you, we had I've never seen my lawyers so mad in my life. Like my lawyer My lawyer, he was like, listen, what we're not going to do is disrespect each other. And I was really so confused. I was like, I did not disrespect you. I'm just telling you what needs to be done, you know, and it was so there was a lot of discomfort because this communication part we've never had, me and my lawyer. And I felt like the first time in from this process, like that I had some kind of control of where I'm going, because I had a vision of what the things I need to do in order for me to save myself. Because the lawyer will just tell me anything, you know, the lawyer will just do what he's been doing. So we got in a fight Friday, and then I sent him the narrative for him to look over, and then he called me Monday like nothing happened. He was like, I looked over the narrative. I now know why you were pushing this letter. I know more about you and all this kind of stuff. So it feels like he backed off a little bit, and now he's listening to what I need to do.
So I want to make clear, when he mentions that I said he should get the narrative, it's not me. It's
No.
Yeah, but let me be clear. It's federal judges. We've spoken with more than 20 judges. 2 of them had the courage to come on YouTube with us, and all of them convey the value of preparing for the probation report, the value of getting a personal narrative in your own words into the probation report, because it can influence the recommendation the probation officer is going to make. So I want to be clear. I'm simply channeling what judges have told us. And by the way, when lawyers say, I have a lot more background information, let me tell you what ends up happening as a result of you giving your narrative to the lawyer. Your sentencing memorandum will look more complete, because a lot of the memorandum is going to be the narrative and background information that you've given him. So Hamza, I know, what stress did you feel over the weekend knowing that your lawyer was yelling at you? I don't work for you. I'm busy. I'm not going to do it. How did that impact your mental health over the weekend?
I was so confused and bothered because it was the first time we've ever had this kind of discomfort. And you know, my wife was comforting me, and she was like, you paid him money, so you should be the one that's telling him how you want stuff to be, even if it bothers him, because lawyers tend to not listen and just do what they want to do, and they think they have the best. And I told them that over the phone. I was like, you know, this is my life. I need to worry about what's going to happen next. This is me going to prison, not you. And you know, I was just it was just hanging around my head the whole weekend. Thankfully, I had my wife just calming me down. On Monday, it was like a different person. I was talking to a different person. He just like completely changed, and you know, he's more lenient on what we should do next.
Here's my takeaway before we transition. I think he respects you. He knows that you're learning how to hold him accountable, and he's recognizing that you're your best advocate, which is all we strive to teach. We can't change what happened or guarantee what will happen moving forward. But if you advocate and learn and hold these lawyers or anyone you retain accountable, odds are you're going to have a better outcome. I know no one who has taken active roles in their life and not succeeded. It's those who are passive, defensive, pretend like this isn't happening, that struggle and cower. And those are the people that have miserable prison terms and life after prison as well. So while he had a difficult weekend, the pain, he won't have the lasting regret that could come from looking at a completed probation report that does not include his narrative. It's going to include the narrative. The judge will see it. And when he's in prison, if you go to prison, your case manager is going to see your narrative and your completed probation report in your own words. That's mitigation in action. That's advocacy. And I'm proud of you for sending the message. And as I told you yesterday on our call, I've sent probably for every 10 of those messages that I send to people in our community, want to know the truth, 1 to 2 actually follow through and send it. Why? Because they don't want to get that phone call. He did it, and he's going to have a better outcome because of it. Now, before we transition to the third text of the Groundhog Day, I do want to knock out a few questions. Gina, I love your comment. Can you share what the lawyer said about getting it's okay when you can hire a lawyer off the internet, but after you hire them, they want you off the internet. It's crazy the way it works. So can you tell us what your lawyer said about getting advice on the internet?
So my lawyer is actually a public defender. Steve couldn't keep his public defender, so we hired his attorney. And I actually found him in the courtroom when we were there. I noticed he had a good rapport with everybody in the courtroom, and I'm like, that's who you want. So if that helps anybody, so be it. But I said, Nancy, I have to do my personal narrative. I'm doing my allocution statement. What about my prison release plan? She's like, whoa, where are you getting all this information? And she's like, Gina, I write that for you. And I'm like, ugh. And then she sent me an email and to that extent. And I replied to her and I said, Nancy, it's not that I don't trust you. I am fighting for my life and my time. And anything that I can do, I said, if it helps me by a week, a month, or a year, taking off my sentence, I am willing to do all this work. And I'm not asking her to do any work. This is stuff that I'm going to provide to her. So, she wants me to sit on the couch and not even read books. Like she's like, Gina, you are absorbing way too much documentaries and podcasts and all of that. And I'm like, Nancy, this is how I'm coping.
Think about that for a moment. Here's the thing. She has good intentions. She wants to help you. She believes this, and they argue because they've been doing it for a long time. It's the right way. But I love my dad, but he's played golf for a long time. He's not any better in the 35th year than he was the second year. He doesn't make him an expert just because he's been doing it for 35 years, as much as I love him. So they have good intentions, but things have changed. And what we've learned from federal judges conveys a slightly different message. So we're just grateful that you're following through and you were doing it. And the idea that someone should scale back doesn't make sense. Now, we are big proponents of just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true. A couple of weeks ago, I came across another so-called competitor who not only takes the content from our website, the dude is too lazy to even edit the words white collar advice and prison professors, right? So it's like people might read that and think this person created it. Upon a further investigation, they would learn this person is a charlatan. So just because you read it, you want to be very discerning. In that sense, I agree with the lawyer, but the value of the client interviews, the federal judge interviews, enables you to think, this is right for me or it isn't. And you don't need to take all of the advice, but you should implement what's best for you. And what you'll learn, what Hamza learned, what Scott Laney learned, what Matt O'Callaghan learned is usually if there's any reservation, once they read the content, it tends to go to the wayside. Like they read the narrative and say, this is really best in class. And that's what tends to happen. And that's the value of producing content. You can hold it, you can read it. Like Mr. Carper's son, Scott, it's one thing to say that he was productive in prison. Oh, I had a good experience. It's another thing when Scott produces his newsletters into a book that he can give away to his friends and family or children someday. This is what I did every day in prison. It was productive. It's fundamentally different when you're doing the work and documenting it. So I'm grateful that you have shared that with us.
I don't know
I do
if
see.
you read my second part, but we're actually giving your book and Michael's book to her because I would love for her to read it. Michael's book's so thick and a little expensive, and we didn't know what to do with it, and that just makes perfect sense.
I appreciate that. My daughter uses his book as her favorite coaster, but she's 8, so she's not ready. It's Uncle Michael's book, Earning Freedom, where she puts her hot chocolate. I haven't told him that yet. So let's transition to something I want to cover regarding. Well, before we do that, I see a couple of hands up. George, I think George, you found us through I think you found us through TikTok, George. It's very good to see you. I won't go into some of my foolish, stupid TikTok videos now, but tell us what your question is.
Yeah. Oh, can I talk now?
Yes, please.
Yes. I'm super frustrated today. I'm in the beginning of my issues. So I hired a private lawyer and I paid the lawyer $10,000. So this guy, he's not telling me anything. He's not telling me what could be accomplished. He's just taking my money and forwarding emails to me from the DOJ. So I reached out to him today. I said, hey, I have tried to email you several times. Can you tell me what's going on, what they are going to do next? we did the first reverse profile, and he never contacted me. So when I reached out to him today, he told me, oh, DOJ messaged me on Monday. I forgot to reach out to you. I forgot to tell you that they're requesting for evidence. I said, well, I already emailed you all my evidence. You have them all. He said, no, you have to resend it again. So I'm super upset that after paying you 10 grand, you don't care about responding to DOJ. You don't care about updating me what's gonna happen. So I'm super upset. If I had known, I already paid him before I knew about you guys. So after listening to your video, I felt calm within my heart, and I felt the need to go to my lawyer and say, look, I want to tell them the truth. I'm ready to accept take responsibility for my stuff. I don't want to go to trial. I don't want to prove that I'm smart or anything. So after listening to your video, I felt good within my soul that I should just go out there and tell them the truth, what happened, and deal with the consequences.
So I appreciate that. So let me offer some insights, and everyone who's retained a lawyer probably attests to this, and something that I don't know the lawyer and all the details, but something for you to possibly consider. $10,000 for a white collar defense attorney, it ain't much, right? I mean, we're talking, a lot of good lawyers are $500, $1,000 an hour, $300, that's 20 or 30 hours. And when he took that money, most likely he's assessing how many hours he wants to allocate to it. $10,000 for a defense attorney, it's just nothing. I mean, even if you said 25, I probably would have said that ain't nothing. Okay, so I want you to be cognizant and manage expectations. What can you really expect for 10,000? Negotiating a plea, sentencing hearing, the memorandum will probably, the sentencing memo will probably be 4 pages. He ain't going to prepare you for the probation report. It's just 10 grand. So something you could consider at some point is, and I want to be careful and I don't want to devolve too much in this webinar. If you qualify, federal public defenders are fantastic. It's a social calling. They have resources. Many of them could become defense attorneys in private practice, but they love what they do. So if you find that you're not getting the work that you need and you could qualify for a federal public defender, they are excellent. Gina, despite what your lawyer said to you, you appear to have someone who cares for you and wants to help you. She may be getting advice that if she had given $100,000 to a lawyer, instead they have a federal public defender. So I want you to consider this, but also make really clear, you've got to understand expectations when you give a lawyer 10 grand. It's not much. And I also want you to confirm, before I go to Dr. Rothstein in Florida, I want you to confirm that it's not 10,000. I want you to confirm that 10,000 was an inclusive rate, which would take you all the way through. You could have signed an agreement that was 10,000 offset against a $500 hourly rate. And once you expend the 10,000, he's going to want more money. So I want you to review the retainer and fully understand what you paid for. It could have just been 15 hours of his time.
Yeah, he said it's for a start. If I'm going to trial, then he's going to charge me extra. Or the 10,000 is just for a start.
Right. So that's a problem. So it's just not clear. You gave 10, you're not happy, you don't know what you're getting. Then you'll probably get a bill that says, send me 10 more. And you're going to say for what? And you're just very confused. If I were you, and many people on this webinar would probably agree, if you after the 10 is gone, and I'm sure it is gone, you ain't getting it back. I think if you want to, after that's spent, and you want to go down the road of a federal public defender, I would probably go down that road. And I know you emailed us. We can discuss that with Scott as well, but consider the federal public defender route. Before I transition to the text, I want to go to Dr. Rothstein in Florida. Please lower your hand. You there, Doc? I see you. Unlower. You have to unmute yourself.
What I want to say, Justin, you stole part of my thunder. I want to make this clear. I am a retired surgeon. I'm graduate from law school on May 20th.
Congratulations.
Very good law school. What everybody needs to know is we're talking about money, but this is the big insight: is that this is the whole thing. Is that very few lawyers can practice going against the federal system. If they only did federal work, they'd go broke. So they have very little. Anybody you hire, unless it's a Washington D.C. lawyer, or somebody from New York City that does all this federal work, you're never. They just don't have the knowledge, and this is the brick wall that Justin is running into trying to help out. These attorneys don't even understand the point system. I spent $500,000 in lawyers fees. I had 4 lawyers, One was my brother. He refused to let me pay him. And I thought I brought one that was a healthcare lawyer. Mine was healthcare fraud. And the thing is, what you're doing with this is it's like it's playing with doing state law and criminal state law is like playing flag football. This is like doing federal is you have to have NFL experience, and most don't. So you can pay all the money you want. They don't have experience. They don't even understand the point system. You know, they got me into, they don't even understand the difference between asset forfeiture versus restitution. And so this is the problem that no matter who you get, unless you're going to get a $3,000 an hour lawyer from DC or New York City, maybe LA. I've never been out to the West before. But what happens is you get those kind of lawyers in, all of a sudden your charges will probably drop, will go from criminal. They'll be so intimidated. There's a book called Chicken Shit Lawyers, Chicken Shit Prosecutors. About prosecute, you bring in these $3,000 an hour lawyers that really work in the federal system. They don't want to go against them and they'll back down. Next thing you know, you're on the civil side. Justin, am I correct?
I don't agree with all that. I've read that book. It's in my office, and I was reprimanded one time for having a swear word in my office. That's a separate conversation. But yes, I've read the book. I agree with parts of it, that the government likes the low-hanging fruit because it's easier to prosecute. And if you have massive resources, as some CEOs do at that expense, they may not move forward. I understand that. And I agree with the sentiments about much of what you said about the lawyers and learning to hold them accountable. And to be clear, this isn't a bashing of lawyers. Many of them are excellent and great, though so many people unfortunately have bad experiences. Let's transition to the third message I sent out this morning. And Mr. Carper, I asked you to unmute yourself. I'd love to call on you in a few minutes if you're open to contributing, because you've been so involved in your son's journey. I received a message via Core Links last week. How did Santos do 20 plus years in prison? This place is so boring, so monotonous, like Groundhog Day times 1,000. At least Bill Murray in Groundhog Day got to experience new things every day, right? The same routines every day are killing me. So damn repetitive. Makes no sense. I am here. 0. Still haven't seen counselor. This person attended at least 6 of our webinars, as I recall, and it's a couple of year sentence, and it's turning into, as you can see, kind of a life sentence here. So I want to spend the rest of this webinar talking about the structure of a day in prison. So when you are there, you are productive and you never send a message like this. And Mr. Carper, if you would engage, can you walk us through, Mr. Carper, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. Can you walk us through, in your opinion, because your son Scott doesn't ever appear to be bored, doesn't feel like Groundhog Day to him as much as he's writing. Can you walk us through as best you can a day in Scott's life at Leavenworth?
Well, I think he gets up at about 5, and he's got a kitchen shift, which is interesting because I don't think he'd ever been in the kitchen in his life before he went to prison, and declared that was a job he would never want to do if he went, or when he went to prison. But he ends up liking the job. 1, because it gets him up. 2, it gives him an opportunity to socialize, and also gives him access to the kitchen area for other reasons and purposes during the day. So he works in the kitchen, does that shift. Then he is an RDAP, and RDAP takes, I think, 4 or 5 hours a day, pretty much 5 days a week. So that takes up part of his day. He exercises at least twice a day for an hour, 2 hours on a bike or walking around the track. He's enrolled in a correspondent paralegal program. And so he studies that a couple of hours a day, does another shift in the kitchen. He also then is enrolled, I believe, in 3 classes, and has been prepping for another one, which he is going to teach. One of the things that he does, and I believe he does this in the kitchen, that's one of the advantages to working in the kitchen, is he has kind of office hours. Part of the time when he's studying paralegal programs, he's also giving out some of the advice he's gotten through prison professors in terms of helping prisoners create release plans. And because he's also engaged in the paralegal program, a lot of the inmates will bring him legal issues or legal problems, which he very upon will help them somehow try and find resources or deal with. And I get a lot of that sent to me actually, and then I will see if I can assist in finding resources and send them back to him. Then he writes a newsletter, and he also is reading probably 4 or 5 books a week, and he does book reports on those. I probably have not covered everything he does during the day, but he goes to bed about 10 or 11 o'clock at night and then starts the next day. But he's not bored.
I thank you. I pray that all of you, if you're in prison, I pray that your loved ones can articulate to the degree that Mr. Carper just did, your productivity, what you're doing every day in custody. I think that's so impressive. I love hearing it. Thank you. There is no boredom in his life. He's too busy. I'm going to ask Scott Laney a question in a moment. At the end, when he read, "Makes no sense, I am here, 0," we agree that many of you should not be in a minimum security camp, that it's a waste of taxpayer resources. But when I read that, that tells me that he's formed friendships in prison with other guys that like to do kind of like the pity party. The great thing about complaining in the chow hall is you're eventually going to get your turn. Okay, they're going to get to you and you can tell your story. And when I read this, I get the sense that's what's happening here. I haven't met with my counselor yet. Makes no sense that I am here. He's building habits. And as we know, habits are hard to break in life. And it's going to take time for him to undo some of the bad choices he's making. Scott, to this question, I heard it every day in prison when some people thought Michael Santos was crazy for smiling and reading and writing despite serving such a long time in prison. People began to think I was weird, that I was he was mentoring me and really playing a role in changing my life. When someone says, how did Santos do 20 plus years? How would you respond to that?
I would say after getting to know Michael over the last 3 to 4 years now, he has a very closely held set of values, and he's not letting outside sources influence those. So for him, that was preparing for the life that he wanted to live instead of lamenting the life that he lost. And that's something that helped guide me through my prison term. Is it could have been very easy to complain about being in a federal prison in the midst of COVID and being locked down. And instead, I was writing book reports, I was writing posts for my blog. I was doing a good job at work because I think any job worth doing is worth doing well. And I constantly kept in mind, how are the decisions I'm making today leading me to the life that I want to live in the future?
So Michael taught a great course in prison called the Entrepreneurial Compass, and he taught it in the garage in the warehouse. And Michael, part of the course was he asked everyone to identify their values. So he'd say, just write it out on a piece of paper. And this bores some people talking about values. Some would say it would cure insomnia. I think it's important. It was transformative for me. He'd ask everyone to write out their values, and then he'd call on one of the 100 prisoners in the room. It was the most popular class in prison. So it's okay, you identified your 5 highest values: family, character, fitness, whatever it is. And then he would ask the person, well, walk me through your last week in prison, everything you did over the last week. And then at the end of that description, Michael would say, well, you've identified that this is your highest value. Would you say that you're living faithfully to those values? And a lot of prisoners would say, no, I'm saying it, but I'm not following through. I did that for a while too. So the reason when people say, how did Santos do 20 plus years, which is what I've heard a million times since forming my partnership with him, it's because he lived faithfully to those values: family, fitness, religion, education, his network, proving worthy of the love of Carol, who married him when he had 11 years left in federal prison. She's traveling around the country, moving constantly while going through nursing school. And think of the journey. It's remarkable. It's because he lived faithfully to his values, and he knew at some point he was going to be home. So when this person, whom I like very much, who attended 6 webinars, says every day is the same, it's like Groundhog Day. It's frustrating because he's wasting this experience. And as you know, the wasting will lead to a tougher time on the other side of prison. Please. Someone commented being careful about the friendships that you form. Would anyone like to chime in on their own prison routine? Scott Brown, Scott Laney, Matthew O'Callahan, someone that's been to prison. What were things that you did that made the experience productive, so you were never bored? Can anyone chime in and offer some of their thoughts or inspiration or hope for people who are going in? Robert's going in for 7 years. Frank's going in. Go ahead.
Yeah, the last newsletter, Scott said something interesting. I didn't even know it was true. They have an exercise bike, and it's one of the ways in which he exercises. But he'd asked me to identify how far Sacramento was from Leavenworth. Scott got sent to Leavenworth and far away from family and friends. And so I told him, and essentially what he's doing when he's riding the bike is he's riding the bike home. And so far he tells me he's ridden the bike home and back, and he's riding it back again. And it's just a trick that he's using to keep himself engaged in that particular exercise. It helps him.
I love that story. By the way, Scott has agreed to let us distribute portions of his newsletter. Mr. Carper will do a little edit. So if you have interest in receiving the newsletter, you can put your email address here in the chat, maybe send it direct to Scott Laney if you can, and then we will distribute it next week. But Mr. Carper's agreed to share Scott's newsletter. So many people have asked. And if you have interest, just put your email or send it to Scott, and we'll send you Scott's newsletter from Leavenworth. It's excellent. It's so great. It's something I look forward to reading every Friday. I think I've only missed a couple. I learned from every single one of them. So I think it's wonderful that you're doing that. Okay. Any other questions? Anyone can chime in. Leo, I see your hand. If you can unmute yourself please, what is good to hear from you.
I spent 42 months in, and it was fine and dandy, but the programs that they have, take as many as you possibly can, busy yourself with those. There were some federal programs that people came in from the outside to come in and help you do stuff. In Phoenix, when I was in Phoenix, they did schooling programs. Since I already had a degree, they wouldn't let me take some of them, but there were so many that you could do. A lot of the classes are taught by inmates. And so take advantage of those. And I journaled a lot. I got books or got notebooks and journaled every day. And that helped get some of the frustration and being terrified. You could write down a lot of things so you weren't so terrified. You get it out of your mind so you don't have all that that tension in your body. So that's what I did to keep sane.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Next week, we're going to spend more time I want to get back into disciplinary infractions and how they pop up. Matt and I cover that in our new RDAP course that should come live tomorrow. So if you have interest thank you, Frank, for sending your email. Absolutely, we'll send you Scott's newsletter. Anyone wants to learn more about the RDAP course, just send a message to Scott or Matt. We'll coordinate that. But Matt and I talk a lot about, Matt, let's touch on this as a preview for next week. There are obvious things in prison, and then John and Frank, I'll come to you. Matt, through our course, we kind of talked about obvious things like not using an iPhone. Okay, that's an obvious disciplinary infraction. But people get into trouble in some more nuanced ways that they might not think is a problem. Can you kind of share on that as a harbinger for next week?
Yeah, absolutely. There's, I would encourage most people when they get to wherever they're heading is to read the rule book. Read the paperwork that they provide you. There's a lot of, sort of ticky-tack stuff there that can trip you up, from, borrowing other people's medications, that's a no-no, to having too much, commissary in your locker, to taking food back from the cafeteria. But on the RDAP side, there's, as you said, more nuanced stuff, breaking confidentiality, things like that can get you in a lot of hot water. So it's constantly every day being diligent and aware of your surroundings and making sure you're putting your best foot forward.
What I learned through prison in the 1 year that I was there, everyone goes on there really on heightened alert. And then once they feel as if they kind of own and understand this environment, that's when some of the rule breaking can begin. So you really want to be on constant alert. John, I asked you to lower your hand. We'd love to hear your question.
Hey, Justin, how you doing? Sorry, my
Good, buddy.
camera's not working.
That's all right.
Do you mind if I ask a question about RDAP?
Ask away.
Yeah, so I originally got indicted in 2019, and I told the probation officer about my alcohol abuse problems. Come to 2022, I finally took a plea, and in my PSR, similar to what you're saying before, I didn't mention my alcohol abuse problems because I didn't want to look bad to the judge. You know, I wanted to look in the best light. Come get sentence time. I got sentenced at 37 months. I thought I was going to get 12 to 18 months. I didn't think I was going to even be eligible for RDAP. I then, after, struggling with alcohol and didn't want to go through detox in prison, I entered drug and alcohol treatment center 2 days after sentencing, outpatient. There 3 days a week. It's going great. I haven't drank in 15 days. And I now have a letter from them and the U.S. attorney has agreed to take that letter and put it as an addendum or attachment to my PSR at the BOP. I already got a surrender date and my facility, which does not have have RDAP program.
So we're okay. So a few thoughts. Where were you designated?
Fort Dix camp.
Right, the camp doesn't have it, the load does. So where do you live?
Atlantic City, New Jersey.
Right, so Matt was in New Jersey. There's some work you need to do to get redesignated or try to. Matt was in New Jersey. He went to the federal prison camp in Lewisburg, which is where he did RDAP, and he was the leader of that program. Now you can go to Fort Dix, get in and get transferred, but I'd encourage, we should have that conversation offline. Also, we do have this course coming out tomorrow on the RDAP program. Every phase of it, Matt and I did it. It's really in your interest to go through it. And but I'm glad you have the amendment. But if you can go to a prison that has RDAP, the math suggests on 37 months. Well, you heard Hugo, our client, on a 36-month sentence. He was out of there in 10 months, right? 37 months, left 15. 37 is the best number because at 37 months or more, you get 1 full year off for RDAP. So 37 months less good time of 6 months is 31 months, 12 months off for completing the drug program is 19 months. You get 6-7 months in the halfway house, that's 12 or 13 months, plus you're getting earned time credits along the way. And it's like 10 months, 11 months in prison, presuming all goes well, which is why you want to try to get rerouted to a prison that has RDAP. We can help. Just send me a message and I'll coordinate that. But I do applaud you for you doing your own advocacy and amending the PSR. That's vital to getting treatment. So I applaud you for doing that, but you need to send a separate message so we can try to help you there, okay?
I will, real quick. I wouldn't have been able to do it without your website and these webinars. I greatly appreciate it. And I have been my self-advocate, because that's what I needed to do, but only from the advice that you guys have given me so far. So I will be in that RDAP program tomorrow and I will message you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I applaud you for doing the work. Thank you so much. Frank, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, with regard to Rob Ray's comments about working with everyone and kind of expecting the unexpected. When I was designated, I also live in California, thought we were going to get designated 500 miles away or so, and then wound up getting designated 3,000 miles away to the Butner Low Camp. And that, with working with Justin, Michael, and others, we actually looked at it, and based on, all of the needs, that actually was an incredibly good choice, even though it's very, very far away from home. And then kind of making the best of a bad situation and then working with others, within the organization, getting very, very well planned, mentoring on what I'm going to be doing when I get in and I get there. And then even to the point of managing some of my healthcare issues, incredibly helpful with. And then lastly, even in working and mentoring, I think that, and Justin, I don't know if you know this or not, I'll probably be the first to teach the new Preparing for Success After Prison course. that Michael wrote. I'll be the first at Butner to teach it. And then even instead of waiting for the caseworker to speak, our strategy and plan, again, working with the organization, is to write a cop-out as soon as I get there, as soon as feasible, to be able to teach the course. And this course is also approved by the Bureau of Prisons. So if all goes as planned, I'll be able to teach, of course, have to do my work and my job. But on the other hand, books will be shipped to the prison. I won't have to come out of pocket to print things, and that I'm on my way to success. And this is all with working with the organization. So I could not stress working with Justin, Michael, and others more. Could not do it. It's a lifesaver.
We appreciate you saying that. Thank you so much. Frank's mentioning the advocacy and work that Michael's doing in the prisons. So it is a nonstop effort. Michael is flying to Missouri, driving 6 hours to a prison in Illinois, Duluth, Milan. He's all over the country training both staff and also prisoners on our programs. So there's many prisons right now that are implementing prison professor programs. And we expect it to only grow, to prove the changes that are coming. Imagine a guy serving 26 years in prison who at one time was sent to the hole for writing his big book, Inside Life Behind Bars in America. They sent him to the hole for writing the book. He was then transferred to Taft, where I met him in 2008. He then wrote Earning Freedom, which is really the basis for the First Step Act. There are people in the institution that will say a big part of the First Step Act passing is because of the work that you did. There are people in our community who will say the reason it's gone from 10 to 15 days earlier is because of your advocacy, Michael, alongside Hugh Hurwitz, John Gustin, former BOP officials. But to think that a guy who served 26 years now getting paid to go in and teach and train is remarkable. And it should provide hope to you to know that more reform, we hope, is coming, but there has been massive reform over the last 4 years. As hard as it was for Robert to hear 84 months, it's terrible thanks to prison reform, right? And you'll be home much quicker than you would have been than I went in 2008. So we want to be grateful for that, right. But know that Michael's working from, Scott Laney and I can attest to this. Michael's up at 3 a.m. There's text messages from him at 3:30. I ain't up yet, but he's working. He doesn't have children. This is his life. Prison reform, teaching and inspiring people in prisons and jails. It's all he's known, and more is coming. We truly believe that, but we want to be grateful for what's here and grateful to staff, many of whom are so welcoming of him. More change is coming. All right, it's 11:04. Are there any questions or anything we haven't addressed? Next week, I'm going to touch on disciplinary infractions. I want to touch a little bit about probation. Any hands or questions coming up right now? Robert,
I just wanted to say, and I forgot to add that, the book Earning Freedom and also the Straight A Guide, required reading for everybody. That'll make your life so much easier.
Right. Well, I'd encourage you to read that. It'll provide some perspective as well, and the release plan book if you haven't already, because you should go to prison with your release plan. Oh, good, Robert has it.
Just let go plug. I do want to make a comment, Justin. So I came from a place of no hope, regret. I'm at a place now where I'm looking ahead. I'm looking at things I'm going to do in there to become better, not only for myself but to make things right with society, and that makes me feel good. And I'm ready for that challenge. And I just can't stress the importance of planning, not only planning your day and your schedule, but planning for the future to make amends with yourself and make amends with the public.
That's exactly right. And Robert, like many people in our community, he'll be documenting his journey while he's in custody. And once that's up, we'll distribute that link for all of you to follow the journey as well, whether it's a website, the release plan, a blog once a week, in a newsletter, core links. It's absolutely something that you should be doing. We can't change our past to the fact that we're in prison in one day, but if we commit to doing just a few minutes every day, we rewrite the narrative, and that's how things change. But it requires work. I see. Are there any other? Joanne, I know you had you asked a question. Phil, you had left a comment. You want to ask the question, or I can read it.
I just wondered where your RDAP info would be. And I wanted to mention my son has been moved to the unit for RDAP, and he's just waiting to get in a class. People who have outdates ahead of him are getting in first, but he self-advocated like crazy to get in there, and so he's in a good place.
Where is he serving time?
He's at Milan. That's where he heard Michael Santos speak.
Oh, Michael was just there. Was he
Yes.
there when Michael spoke?
Yes, and somebody mentioned it on our closed Facebook page, and I told him, be sure to sign up. And he did, and in fact, his unit had a special session with Michael. So
That's fantastic.
I am so happy he did that, and I will be sending him Michael's book. Or one of them,
Fantastic.
in a series, all of them in a series.
Thank you. So we're working on the RDAP course. I'll send you a message. I know you may want to go through. Matt, my friend Matt here, went through the program at Lewisburg. He leads the course. I'm just asking questions.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you. Congratulations that he's an RDAP. That'll get him home much
Yes.
more quickly.
That
Okay,
was in
great.
his PSR too. It was
Good.
in
Yeah,
his PSR, which he was told was very helpful.
Good.
With comments from his psychologist.
Good. So keep us posted. I'll get you information. Someone asked, do you have any resources that could help calculate the time that would be served on a sentence? We have had a calculator that we've used before, but with so many changes to the RDAP to First Step Acts and crediting, we need to update it. Someone in our community asked about like a 41-month sentence. If you have a specific question, a sentence length, I can answer it. Someone said they're wondering if someone wants to throw out like a hypothetical number, we can kind of reverse, we can do the math. Angie or Caitlin, if you want to do that. 1 year and 1 day. Anyone want to chime in and off Scott, or can you offer some insights on what potentially that could look like on a year and a day sentence?
Sure, I can. One year and a day is an interesting one. I mean, you're lucky because you get the good time credit because your sentence is over a year in length. So once we take 85% of that, you're left with 10.5 months. The challenge is you'll receive your First Step Act credit as well. You have a shorter sentence, so hopefully you'll only be there for, I'd say, less than 7 months. Ideally, you'll be receiving 10 months for every 30 days. The real variable in a sentence like that comes in play with the release plan in terms of how do you articulate to your case manager why you're worthy of more time in pre-release custody, that being halfway house or the home confinement. So there's some flexibility in terms of what that looks like. We've had clients get out as early as 4 months, but that was with the CARES Act. I think you could be looking at 6 to 8. Where do you feel they'd be in regards with that, Justin?
Yeah, so the answer is we've absolutely seen everything. We heard Paul last week articulate, or 2 weeks ago articulate, that on a year and a day sentence at Otisville, he was released after just 80 days. His case manager loved his release plan. He surrendered with it. She encouraged him to teach the program to others. Clearly that influenced him getting more time. So we've seen everything from 3 months to 6 months, 7 months. We can't tell you exactly what that number will be, other than the good thing is the day you get there on a year and a day sentence, you're eligible for release. The law allows up to a year in the community. Might be unlikely, but it's not crazy that you could get 5 or 6 months. I know Frank's going in for a year and a day. Very good chance he's out of there in 4 or 5 months, even with CARES and the CARES expiring. So there's myriad options. We'd encourage you, whether you work with us on it or not, to build the release plan, to surrender with it, and articulates the stability post-prison, the job, employment, all of that stuff is really crucial because, as John Gustin told us in a webinar, there's only 7,000 halfway house beds in the country, and your case manager in prison wants to give one of those beds to someone they think is a good bet. So if you're watching TV all day or sending messages like our friend that says, I shouldn't be here, this is Groundhog Day, is that person more likely to get more halfway house time than someone like Scott Laney or Paul or Frank, who's going to be teaching a course? Logic dictates the guy who's working is probably going to get more time. So the answer to your question is, I don't know. Depends on how hard you want to work. Do you want to build the release plan? Do you want to document how and why you are a law-abiding citizen? Now, to a 36-month sentence, depends. I don't know if you're doing the drug program, but again, the math says with the drug program on 36 months, 5 months good time, 31, you get 9 months off for completing the drug program. Now you're down to 22 months. During that first 9 months, give yourself a few months of earned time credits. Now you're down to what? 19 months, 18 months. Then you're going to get 6 months in the halfway house, 12 months with the drug program. So it's very easy to reverse engineer or look back on what the sentence could be. And the drug program is a big variable when you ask about how long someone could serve. which is why some people on 37-month sentences are getting out of there in 10 months. A lot of it hinges on how quickly you get into RDAP. Like Matt was very lucky. Matt on a 51-month sentence. Matt, how quickly were you into RDAP?
I was in RDAP within 2 weeks. So it was really, I was very fortunate that the timing worked out. But I also surrendered early to get that moving.
Matt was ready to get this party started, like many of you are while waiting. You know, you've been in prison this whole time anyway. You want to get in and get started. So Chris, to everyone, yes, I should be in RDAP. Presuming you get into RDAP within a month or so, you want to time the surrender well. You avoid disciplinary infractions, problems. Presume there's no delays in RDAP with COVID. Some have started and stopped. Not 10 months, 11 months, 12, you're in and out. Okay. Very good news, but you have to avoid problems. And as Matt and I discussed in the learning management course, a lot of dudes get held back. They have to start the program over. They get thrown out. So they're just not going to give you the time off because they like you. You have to follow the rules and truly accept responsibility. Okay. Anyone else here? Any questions we haven't answered as we go? Let's see. I see Gina's pretrial services officer is at her home. Be a pretty standard visit, quick visit. Let's see. I offered my pretrial services officer a cup of coffee. Apparently that was a no-go, as they're not supposed to take anything from you. He was very polite in saying a no. I said, thank you. Okay. Any other questions we haven't answered as we wrap up another weekly webinar? Anything missing? Anything? Any other questions? Make sure. We good? Anyone? I'm talking to myself here. Okay. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you for joining. Lana, I see you were trying to talk. Did you have a question?
I did. I was asking about if the RDAP, that's only for drug charges, right? Because my judge told me time sentences, time served. So I don't know if there's any good time on white collar crimes or it's just for drug related crimes.
So thankfully, that's a big negative, and Matt and I debunked that in the course about who qualifies. And we'll follow up with you, Lana, about that and what that process would look like. Thankfully, you have not done your probation interview yet. I know it's on the 19th or so of this month. So if that's a path for us, we'll have ample time to prepare for it, where you'll have an adequate disclosure. So that's good news and the benefit of you taking action. So that's
okay.
And what I know has been a difficult time. But we'll discuss that separately, but it is not too late for you. And no, it is not only for drug offenders.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I have sentencing on Monday. Any last minute advice, Colin? Yes, my friend. We want to make sure your allocution statement is accurate. If you're going to speak, make sure it has the right message for the judge. You should read it, which is fine. You should read it and you can hold it. Do not use this as a sales opportunity to try to persuade the judge. Hopefully your narrative is in your probation report. If not, given it sentencing on Monday, you can ask your lawyer to add the narrative to the probation report. That would help you in prison. So want to make sure your narrative is done. And I would say your allocution statement should be 2 pages or less. You should read it, but it's not about you. I didn't mean to do it. I didn't have bad intentions. It's about your victims, the people that you hurt, and your plans to make amends and your plans moving forward. So if you'd like more clarity on the allocution statement, reach out. If not, my advice is to be humble, to be honest, to be genuine. And after your sentence, to have your lawyer ask for a specific prison, a surrender date, and if RDAP is part of the process, ask for an RDAP prison. That would have been a good short YouTube short, but that's what I want you to do. Okay. Okay, great. That's a wrap. We'll see all of you next Thursday. The replay of this will be up, I hope, tomorrow, and I'll get more information out on the RDAP course that Matt and I created. Okay. I've enjoyed our time together. Thank you. I'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Justin.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.